All right. Very good morning, everyone. Let's continue this second demo classes. Right. So again, I'm just keeping it to the basic. Just I'll cover it what we discussed yesterday, and then today also we'll see some of the basic stuffs, and then we will wind up these demo classes. Since I already told like 17 and 18, these two are the demo classes, followed by 19 and 20 are the weekends, and our actual classes is going to start on 21st. Right. Let's start today's demo classes. We understood about database course content. This is what the complete course content what we discussed. And if anybody has any queries again on the course content, always go to Mallik034blogspot.com and training. Go under this database section. You will be seeing what are the keynotes of my course and what will be like course content looks like. And again, as I said, like, course is not limited to this content. If there are any advanced topics or any particular section you want to repeat it, you want to revisit it, or you want to include in this course content, everything will be like discussed in our WhatsApp group, and then that will be taken as one or two extra classes, and then we'll be regularly connecting over a weekend, and we'll be conducting by combining 2-3 batches for that particular topic, right? That's one of the other advantages. And then uh, we have seen like how the course content, how the PPTs, how the lab materials, and then how our entire Google Drive is going to look like. I just created this particular directory yesterday, and then I uploaded all the course content and course materials and everything. And then if you go here on daily session and then daily recording, whatever we conducted yesterday, so I uploaded that, and then whatever the logs we executed on yesterday, so that is already uploaded here. So that's the beauty of this course, like, whatever the command we're going to execute in our lab, so that will be like captured and then uploaded here. So you can refer this daily recording along with the daily session log, so that you can correlate and you can practice it on your own lab. Right. So, and then some of the prerequisite sessions. These are like, mandatory. You have to go through that before the actual course, so that you'll be very comfortable during the course. And then this is our actual course content. Inside that we'll be having this particular database, and then followed by there are so many subfolders. And then we have something called Oracle ebooks, and then it has a uh, lot of ebooks and PDFs, so that you can refer them for your own practice and other things. And then we have some samples, interview questions and answers for rack, standalone, so many other questions. You can just go through them. And then again, thousands of monitoring script here, so you can use them for practice purpose. And then we have readily available ISO images. You can just download it and you can build your own VM. And then some other Oracle patches and softwares are available, 19C, 12C, and then other patches are available. You can use them for practice. And then ready VMs, as I already explained, there are standalone VMs, React VMs, or variety of configurations. You can just download them and you can use them, and you can do any kind of practice. You can crash them, and you can, once a VM is crashed, you can just delete it, again re-download it, and then reuse it. So you can do whatever practice you want it. And then some other tools and topics are available here. Just refer them. Right. So this all like again course content what we discussed. And then we started with our environment setup. So environment setup is quite simple. We're going to use Oracle VirtualBox. So Oracle VirtualBox is readily available in Google. That's freely available. You can just download Oracle VirtualBox. Whatever the latest VirtualBox version is available, 6.1 is the latest one. You can just download Oracle VirtualBox. Just download this one here. And then if not, it's already available in our Google Drive. If you go here like other tools and patches, you can see Oracle VirtualBox. You can just download this one here, or you can download it from here. So once you download it, you need to install it as simple as it's just normal your normal whatever, like your normal whatever the OS you're going to install. It's similarly like that. So you can just install this particular Oracle VirtualBox, and then you can build your own VM. So how it is going to work? If I want to illustrate with a Paint, uh, in industry, you will be having your Linux servers. So your Linux server somewhere will be like in your London or New Jersey or whatever, like New York or wherever it is, like your data center is resides over there. Any client, their data center will be somewhere in your remote locations. And then, and considering this is your one of your VM or one of your physical server, considering this is my lab Oracle Lab 1. So this is your Linux server somewhere in your London or New York or Washington DC or whichever like remote data center. And then that VM, this particular server, that is Oracle Linux, Oracle Lab 1, is might be a physical server or might be a virtual server. Based upon your company needs, might be a physical box, physical server will be available in data center, or there may be already one your virtual host is already your physical server is available. On top of that, you might be launched your virtual box or launch your virtual VMs. So it might be your VM virtual box or it might be your physical box, whatever it is. It doesn't matter for as a DB. It doesn't matter whether it's a physical or virtual. For me, I need a host name. That's your Oracle Lab 1. I need an IP address associated to that 192.168.1.1 or whatever it is. I need that IP address or I need that host name. If I have my IP address or the host name as a DBA, I can use a tool called MobileXterm. This is my MobileXterm. I can use this MobileXterm tool, or I can use my putty session. This is my putty session. These are like two terminals to connect to access to your Linux box. Either you need a MobileXterm or you need a putty sessions. Once you have any one of these, you can use the IP address or the host name, whatever associated to that. This is my host name and this is my IP address. I can use that IP address or the host name. I can simply connect to uh, that server remotely. I can use the root user or Oracle user or whatever the username password I have it. I can connect to that server remotely. So I connected to that Oracle Lab 1 remotely. Even though that server is somewhere in your remote data center, I can sit here anywhere in the world. I can access them. As long as it is available publicly, the IP address is associated in the public network, I can access it via public network, or even if I have my VPN, I can connect to VPN, I can access that server. So once I'm able to access, once I'm able to log into that server, and then I can do whatever the DBA task, whatever needed for DBA task, I can do that one. So first and foremost, as a DBA, once you get access to that server, we will make sure that uh, our Oracle user is created or not. If not, we will coordinate with our Linux admin and we'll create Oracle user, and then we'll get Oracle user and password. And then we will connect directly to Oracle user. We'll connect directly to that server using Oracle user. If you got Oracle username and password, we'll connect directly using Oracle username and password. So then we will log in with Oracle user, and then we'll start with our setting up our environment. So how we are going to do that one? Again, first thing is we'll set up our Oracle user, and that will be done with your Linux admin. Or if you have root access, you're gonna go ahead and do that one. And then some of the prerequisites, prereq RPMs. If there are some of the prerequisites RPMs are needed for my Oracle database installation, so we'll go ahead and then install those prerequisites RPMs. So again, prerequisites RPMs, how we are going to install them? We are going to install with our yum install, or we're going to use the manual method. So we're going to use like yum install some of those prerequisites RPM. We're going to go ahead and then install them, or we're going to use like manually download those RPMs. We're going to manually install them using RPM IVH. So that's the second step. Once the prerequisites RPM is installed, then we're going to create our Oracle home U01 app, Oracle product, and 19C, and then DB home underscore 1. So this is your DB home. You need to set up software. You need to download the software, and then you need to download. Once the download is done, you have to install that software. You want to unzip that software. This is a kind of your zip folder or the software provided by Oracle. You need to download that 19C software, and then you need to untar over there. This is a tar file you have to untar in this particular server. This is the location you're going to create, and then you're going to untar that one. Once you create an untar over that server, and your Oracle software is ready. Once your Oracle software is ready, you're going to create your database. That will be like your next step. Create database. Create database, you can call DevDB. You're going to create the database. So that's your second step. And then you first install your Oracle software here. This is your Oracle software. Once you install your Oracle software, just take this one. This is your Oracle software, what you installed. On top of that Oracle software, you're going to create your own database over here. So that's your DB, whatever you created. So then once your database is ready, then your DBA activity starts. Managing the database and providing the users, providing the creating the users and providing the roles and privileges to your users, end users, application users, and then making sure that this particular database is having enough space. And then you have to make sure that your database is going from perfectly fine. You don't run out of space, and your data file directories, your archive file directory, your recovery file directories, all are having enough space in order to work my database up and running, and in order to run my database functionally without downtime. So those are like your DB activities comes into picture. So here, like, this is not like entire setup looks like in any organization. So there will be one remote server associated with the host name and IP address, and then on that particular server there will be like Oracle software will be like installed. That's one of the that is called your Oracle home. You have to download that software from your Oracle repository, and then you have to install that software first. Once the software is installed, on top of that we're going to create my database, and then that database is once ready, and then we're going to create some application users, developer users, and end users, and then we're going to pass those username and password to those end users, and then they will be accessing my databases, and they will be doing their operations. They will be doing their business operations. So my as a DBA job is to make sure that my database is functional and it is available for 24/7, and then it is growing fine, and then we have to monitor all the mount points and other activities as a DBA. So that's the overall architecture and overall function how DBA works. And then since this particular database is remotely sitting under London or some remote data center, is that mandatory to all the DBA to go to data center to manage its servers? No, we are not going to do that. We are not going to do. We are not going to go into our data center and then work. We are only working remotely. We are just accessing these database servers by just taking a remote connection of them by using either PuTTY sessions or mobile exterm. We'll just take a remote session and then we'll monitor them, whatever the space and then whatever the database installed on that, whether it's up and running or not, whether the listeners are running or not, whether the users are able to access or not. So all will be like doing it remotely, sitting wherever, whichever location you want, remotely sitting and remotely accessing these servers. And then we're managing those databases. We're managing those databases as well as the database servers, as well as that Oracle home, right? And then when we're going to go to data center, in case this particular VM or this particular physical server is not accessible, and then you are not able to start it remotely, then there is a need of any guy, either a Linux admin or the DBA has to go to data center, physically check for that VM or the physical server where it is residing, and see whether any cable, whether any network cable or power cable is plugged in, or is there any disruption in the power cable or network cable. Then only they will go to data center and they will unplug it and plug it, and they'll just check the power supply and they'll just check the network supply, and everything is fine. Then they will start that VM or start that physical machine, and then they'll come back. That's it. Again, once the server is booted and started, and then we're going to use remotely, and then we can do our activities. So that's the overall concept how it works. And now coming to this Oracle Lab 1, that is either maybe physical server or the your like a VM virtual server. So first we need to get the ISO image for that. So for that ISO image, you can download it from your Oracle e-delivery. Once you go to your Oracle e-delivery softwares, search for Oracle e-delivery on Google, and that will take you to Oracle e-delivery cloud. And then you can create your own user ID. And then you can, once you create your user ID, you can log into that Oracle e-delivery. I'll just show you that. Right, let's once you log into that, what happened once again? Right, so once you log into that, you can, these are the two softwares I said. One is you have to set up this VM. You have to set up this VM first. So that will be like your Linux admin will do that one. So as a DBA, here like for practice purpose, so you can install this VM on your this particular Oracle VM VirtualBox. In order to install that one, you need to download that ISO image. That ISO image you can get it from this Oracle EWA. Just go ahead and download Oracle Linux. The moment you do Oracle Linux, just search for Oracle Linux, and then there'll be like various Oracle versions here, Oracle Linux versions. So we're gonna go with deal with this 7.9. Just add that one. Once you add it, it'll add it to your cart here, and then continue. And then this is your Oracle Linux. Just select your platform x86-64 and then continue. And then there's a terms and condition. Just accept that one. Just continue. Right. So once you're done, like you just click on the very first ISO image. So remaining, you no need to worry for this. We're not using it. We need just this particular ISO image. Ending with 9690-01.iso. Just click on this one. It'll ask you to download. I just already downloaded that particular ISO image. If I go here, this is my ISO image ending with this 6990-01. This is ISO image which is already downloaded. When this ISO image is ready, so you can build your own VM. You can build your own VM in this particular using Oracle VirtualBox. How you're going to build that one? You just click on this create new. Once you create new, and then you can provide your own VM name. So I'm just going to give Oracle Lab 1. And then where you want to store, you can provide that C drive, D drive, whatever the drive you want. You can just provide that location and then go next. And then how much RAM you want, 6 GB, or you want provide 8 GB, or you want to provide, I'll just give approximately 6 GB, or you can provide 4 GB, 8 GB, whatever need, you can just provide that. Go next, and then create a virtual disk now, and then VDI, virtual disk image, and then dynamic allocation, and then how much size you want to provide. So I'll just go with the default 50 GB as of now. So your Oracle Lab 1 is ready. That's your setting is ready. Like whatever this Oracle Lab 1 setting is ready, you need to install that OS on that. So you have to do some configuration over there. Like you have to click on the setting here, and then very first thing is you in general go to advanced, and then make sure that this is a bidirectional, so that you can copy paste in VM and your desktop or your laptop. This should be like bidirectional. So this advanced, make this as a bidirectional, and the remaining two just leave it blank, and go to system here, and then this floppy uncheck, and then this you can bring it down. You can keep only optical and then hard disk. You just keep these two, and then your RAM, whatever the RAM you assign, this will be like your memory. And then your processor, if you have like 1 or 2 processor, you just increase that one, otherwise keep it 1. And then this one you can leave it blank. And then the display, you can go with this VBox or VGA, the first option. VBox VGA is like very widely used, so you go with that VBox VGA, and then these two, like you just leave it blank. Your storage, let's leave it blank. Audio, leave it blank. And network, make it your bridge adapter here, first one, and enable the second one, and that you can make it again bridge adapter. Or like when one adapter is more than enough, and then you can make sure that one adapter is more than enough to work, but again you can enable the second adapter also for just practice purpose. We have the network concept where to deal with that, so you can enable this adapter 1 and 2 and make sure those are like bridge adapters. And then yeah, that's it. So there's a shared folder. If you want to share any of your C drive or D drive from your local laptop or desktop to in this particular VM, you just go ahead and then do this share drive, and then whatever this software location you have it, C Mallik, YouTube, and then course VL. So I'm just gonna share this drive because I have this 19C and then 19C database and 19C grid software here. I'm just gonna copy this one here. I'll share that one using this shared folder. I'll just add here, copy that path, and then you are going to do that software, and then I'm going to do read only and auto mount, and then this is the software. I'm just going to mount here. So your shared drive is mounted here. So these are your configuration setting. You have to do it and then click OK. Once that is done, you just start your VM. once you start your VM, it will ask you to where is your ISO image, and then you can browse your ISO image wherever you are downloaded here. You can browse that ISO image. So this is your like a startup screen looks like this, and you have to browse that ISO image. Just click here, and then you have to add that one, add button here, and you have to go to that location. This is your location where you downloaded this ISO image, and then this ISO image again it is downloaded from this Oracle e-delivery. This is the ISO image, and then you can select that ISO image. I'll just select this one here. Sorry. Right. So this ISO image is selected, and then choose that ISO image, and then you selected that ISO image and start your installation. And the moment you start it, you will get this particular installation screen here. Right. So first option is install your Oracle Linux 7.9, and then other one is like test your that ISO image. So go with the first option, install your Linux ISO image, and then get installed. So that I will show it here. Right, any questions so far, like whatever the actions we did it, right? So since we don't have a physical server for practice, what we are going to do, we are going to use this Oracle VM VirtualBox, that's your hypervisor, so that whatever the laptop or whatever the desktop you have it, inside that we're going to create our VM VirtualBox, and then in that virtual machine we are going to install our database, and we're going to practice that one. So that's a simple concept of why we're using this Oracle VirtualBox. Right. So otherwise, like you have to buy a physical machine and then try to install over there and then practice it. So there's no point of buying physical machines and practicing over there. So that's where we're just installing this, making use of this Oracle VirtualBox, and we're creating our own VMs, and then on top of that VM, we're installing the database. Right. So once your installation screen comes, so I'll just open here. So your installation screen comes, so you can just select this first option here. This is first option is your install Oracle Linux 7.9. Just click enter. And then it will start with the installation. You have to create some basic standards. Somebody is asking, in industry mostly it will be like Linux server or work on Windows server. Most of the times, most of the Oracle product, uh, most of the customers prefer to go with the Linux. And till I have seen few customers, they're still using uh, Oracle on Windows. So other like we have to work on Windows. But most of the customers prefer to work with Oracle Linux. So most of us will go with the Linux. There might be various flavors, like it might be RHEL or Ubuntu, or it might be SUSE, or it might be Oracle Linux. There are like various Linux products, Linux flavors. So any one of that customer might be using. However, like even few customer I've seen it, still they are working Oracle with Windows. That's also supported. Right. So first screen is welcome to Oracle Linux 7.9. Just click on continue. And then this is your installation summary. Your time zone, you can select whatever the time zone you prefer. Go with India or whatever the time zone you based on, like just select that time zone. And then keyboard, US English, support language US English. And then this is your installation source, that is your ISO image. This is your like ISO image, whatever we selected, just don't change anything on that. And then the software selection is very important. In this software selection, select this last option, server with a GUI. You will get a GUI mode, otherwise you don't get the GUI mode. Just select that server with the GUI mode. And then once you select that server with the GUI mode, there are like 2-3 package you need to enable here, add-on packages. One is your compatibility libraries, and then your development tools. These two packages you need to enable along with the server one. You don't need to select. If you select any one of these options here, you will not get a GUI mode. Make sure that you have to select the server with a GUI mode, so that you can get a GUI mode, so you can log in and you can access that in a GUI mode. And then once you select the server with the GUI mode, you can select these two compatibility libraries and development tools. And then just click OK. That's your software, whatever the software you selected. And then once that is done, your installation destination, very important. Installation destination, that 50 GB disk what you selected, and then you have to configure, like I will configure my partitions. Just check box this, I will configure my partition, and then click on OK. And once that is done, you have to create your own partition. So I'm going to create only 3 partitions. So that's more than enough to operate your Linux. First one is your boot /boot/boot. So this is boot partition. We need approximately around 600 MB. So I'll just go with 1 MB, sorry, 1 GB, approximately 1000 MB. I'll go with that. Boot partition is the first one. Just add the mount point. And then the second one is your swap. If you given ideally in industry, the swap should be always double of your RAM. If you have like 10 GB RAM you allocated for this VM, swap should be like 20 GB. If you allocated 5 GB of RAM, swap should be like 10 GB. If you allocated 8 GB of RAM, your swap should be like 16 GB. So that's a industry standard. Swap should be always double of your RAM, but it's not hard and fast rule. You can give whatever RAM, whatever the swap you want, but always make sure that swap should be more than your RAM. What I'm going to do, like approximately, I'm going to give just around 15 gig. 15 gig as my swap. Right. So this is 1 GB for boot and 15 GB for your swap. And then remaining, I'll just go with the root partitions, just slash. This is your root partitions. I'll not give anything. I'll just add it here. So that will approximately take 35 GB. Like it's a 1 GB and then 15 GB, 16 GB. Approximately 34 GB is for your root. So overall, like 50 GB what storage I allocated. And then click OK. So these are your mandatory 3 partitions you have to create. And then there are other partitions, home directories, where, temp, and all those things. You no need to create. Everything will be like automatically part of your root partitions. So you no need to create a separate partition for all of them. You just create these 3 basic partitions and then click OK. And then your VM will functional with these 3 partitions without any issue. Just accept and changes. And then that's it. So you are done with that one. You don't need to do anything on the cave dump and security policies. Only on this network and host name, make sure that you can provide your host name. If you don't give also, later point also you can give that one. I can give test VM Oracle localdomain.com. So if you give on Oracle Lab 1, so you can mention this as a Oracle Lab1.com, or you can mention Oracle Lab2.com, Oracle Lab3.com, or whatever the name you want, you can prefer, you can provide that name here. And then make sure that you can enable this networking. If not, we can enable the networking after the installation as well. Right, so I'll just disable it as of now here, and then apply it, and then click OK, and then start with your installation. So this installation typically takes around 15 to 20 minutes. And then we'll revisit here, like, and then make sure that you set your root password. Without root password, it will not complete the installation. Root password is mandatory. That's a master user for your Linux. So root password and then set OK. And then it will start with your package installation, and it will find out what are the RPM needed for this particular server based upon your selection. And then it will start installing all those RPMs. You can see 1469 RPM it's going to install, and it's going to create various mount points, and it will start your Linux server. So this is the typical installation for your Linux. Then your Linux box is ready. This box, whatever this box is ready now. This box is ready now here. Whatever we're doing it, like this box is ready here. Once this installation is done, your Linux box is ready. So it will take around 15 to 20 minutes here. Let it go on. Once this box is ready here, whatever this box is ready, then our job is to download our Oracle software and then install that Oracle software on this particular Oracle Linux server what we just configured. So again, this software, you can go to your same Oracle eDelivery, whatever this eDelivery here. I'll just go back. Go back again. Go back here. Okay, view this content. Okay, I'll just remove this one, remove all. I'll remove whatever this content, whatever that Oracle Linux we added, we just remove that. Now you can search for your Oracle software, Oracle database, Oracle database 19C. And then very first one is your Oracle database 19C, Oracle database 19C 19.3. Just add that one. It will add to your cart here, and then continue with that. and then you can go ahead and select your platform. You can see somebody asked Windows, right? If you download this Windows x86, so this software, so if this platform, if you select this one, it will be like this software, Oracle software is compatible with your Windows. And then these are like other various platforms where it is Oracle software is supported. Now I'll go with Linux x64 and then continue. And then again, this terms and conditions. Once you accept it, you will get your Oracle database software here, this one, and your grid software here, this one, and your Oracle client. You no need to worry, you just uncheck that one. You can download this. The moment you click on this one, it will start downloading it locally. So I already downloaded that here. You can see this is my DB software, ending with your 2063-01, ending with the 2063-01. That's your database software, and then go to your grid software here, ending with your 2068-01, ending with this 2068-01. These are your DB software. Both the softwares are ready here. Right. So then once your softwares are ready, you just need to unzip that one on your Linux server, and then you can try installing them. Right. So this installation is still going on. What we can do, like let it go on. What I can show right now here. I'll just close this one here. Let's go here. I'll just close this one here. I'll just remove everything, whatever I have created here. So now what I said here, like I already told that, we have ready labs here. You can see like these are your ready labs, your rack labs, and you have standalone labs here. You just assume that this is your one of the Oracle lab readily available. Just download it locally on your laptop. Once you download it, you will see something like this. This is your Oracle lab one here. You can see this is a lab I just downloaded. You can just extract here, like if you just make it extract here, that will extract your Oracle lab one. Once that is extracted, you can directly use this particular VirtualBox and you can add that machine. You don't need to install that VM. It's readily available here. You just need to download and you just need to extract it. Once you extract, you will get this particular Oracle Lab one readily available. And then this is your Oracle Lab readily available here. And then just go here and then click on this add button. And you can, wherever you unzipped, you just go to that location and then browse that location here. And then you can provide this Oracle Lab one here. And then your Oracle Lab one is ready here. You just need to start that Oracle Lab one. The moment you start that Oracle Lab one, it's going to start your Oracle Lab one here. Let's go here. These are like ready VMs. You just start with your installation process. Right, your Oracle Linux Server 7.9. Right, so you got your Linux server and you can log in with your root user or whatever the default user, and then your server is ready. So this is what I'm talking about. This is your GUI mode. This is your GUI mode. Whatever you're seeing is the GUI mode based upon that selection. Server with the GUI mode. While installation, you have to select the server with the GUI mode. Then only we'll get this particular GUI mode. Inside this Oracle Lab one, you can open your terminal here. Once you open your terminal, you can do any operation. ifconfig, whatever the command, you can do all those operations here. And then the moment you get this particular IP address, copy this IP address, and then this IP address you can access it using this mobile term. Just open your new session, open your IP address, and then you can access that IP address using this mobile term. Right, so that's a simple thing. Like your VM will be ready in a just single click. You just need to download, unzip it, and you can add it, and then you will get your VM is ready, and you can start that VM, and then you can use it via GUI mode, or you can use it via your command line mode. So that's a simple concept how you can install your Linux, and then how you can make use of your Linux. Once your Linux is ready, next step is to install your database software. So the database software installation and database installation, like once your database software is installed, you have to create your database. Once your database is ready, and then you have to start with your database as the DBA activities. So this installation of database and DBA activities will take it on Monday as a actual class. We'll start with go ahead with one more time installation of Linux, and then we'll start with our database installation, other things. So again, database installation, there are various methods to install your database, starting with your manual method, or starting with your your DBCA as a GUI mode of installation, and your manual method of database creation, and your RMAN clone, RMAN duplicate. There are so many methods to create your database. So all we'll discuss in our actual classes. But for time being, so this is the basics, like what you need to do, how you need to set up your Linux box. Once the Linux box is set up, and then you have to download that Oracle software and you have to unzip that one, and then you have to set up that Oracle Home first. Once the Oracle Home is ready, you have to install that database on top of that. And then once the database is ready, and then we'll continue with our DBA activities. Whatever the DBA activities as a DBA, make sure that your database is available, your listener is available, and then all the end users or application users are able to connect to your database, and your database is growing perfectly fine, and your all the users or end users or application users or your developers all are having proper privileges, roles, and responsibilities. All those, like you have to manage as a DBA, right? So that's a simple intro of how that installation and then how the configuration works in any of the industry standards. And then coming to some of the basics of Linux and networking. So once your server is ready, this is your server, and then you are able to log in and you are able to set up. And then you need to understand what is your DNS and what is your DHCP, what is your name resolution, and what is the forward name resolution, what are reverse name resolution, all those concepts along with your networking basics. So those are the mandatory things you need to understand. First thing is your DNS. That's a DNS stands for your domain name system or domain name server. Um, that actually maps your all fully qualified host name with your IP address, or IP address with a fully qualified host name. For example, if I go to this server here, if I do host name, this is my host name, Oracle Lab 1 localdomain.com. This is my host name. Let's go here. This is my host name. And then if I do ifconfig here, and then this is my IP address. So if somebody wants to connect to my VM using host name, or somebody wants to connect to my VM with IP address, it has to like your DNS server has to resolve that name. If somebody connect using name, it has to resolve to IP. And if somebody connect using IP address, your DNS server has to resolve to host name. That's the name resolutions. Your DNS server will take care of that. So DNS server is nothing but your domain name server or domain name system. For example, any organization has its own domain. For example, if I talk about Infosys, so infosys.com is their own domain. And if somebody talks about TCS, TCS.com is their domain. And if Oracle, Oracle.com is their domain. And if you talk about Wipro, Wipro.com is their domain. So each organization has its own domain. Domain is nothing but a physical server which is available in their remote data center, which is having in terms of terabytes of memory and RAM. So all those will be like whatever the connections, whatever the VM, whatever the physical server, whatever the IP address or host name you're going to connect or you're going to resolve, the connection has to go to your DNS server, and then it has to resolve with the host name with IP address or IP address with the host name, and then you will be able to authorize to connect to that particular server. That's about the DNS. Each organization has its own domain, and then they will be making use of that domain to resolve those IP address to host name and host name to IP address. And then in a lab exercise, we have something called bind RPM. If you install this bind RPM, and then you can make it as this particular server as a domain server here. And then you can create your one more server. For example, I'm going to create one server here. One more Linux box I can install. I can say DNS server, and this is my DNS server here. And then I can install something called this bind RPM. M install bind, M install bind. Bind is RPM, which will install the prerequisites RPM to make your server as a DNS server. You're going to make this server as a DNS server, and then you're going to add this whatever this IP address you have it here. This IP address you're going to add it here in this particular DNS server. The moment you add this Oracle Lab 1 and the IP address on this particular DNS server, if I try to connect to this server, the connection will go to your DNS server first here, and then If I connect with the host name, connection go to my DNS server, and then it will return my IP address here, and then I'm able to connect to my server. If I connect with the IP address, connection will go to my DNS server, and with the IP address, I'll get my fully qualified host name, and then my connection will be established here. So that is the use case of your DNS. You can configure your own DNS on your lab using this m install bind RPM. So this DNS server we configure it during our rack setup, because in rack setup we should have our public IPs, VIPs, and scan IPs, and so many other things. So for that, in order to resolve all those IPs, we're going to set up our own DNS server in our lab itself, so that we can resolve all those IPs. That's useful for your rack setup, but for the standalone or the a single instance installation, so we are not going to worry about our DNS server. So we don't need a DNS server for our single or standalone installation. This DNS server is mainly required for your rack setup. So that's your industry standard, so that each of organization has its own domain, and then all the IPs are hosting will be like resolved via those DNS server. And again, DHCP is a dynamic host protocol. That's a dynamic host configuration protocol, which will dynamically allocate the IP address. The moment you install your VM, automatically IP will be like assigned to that one. That will be like handled by your DHCP server. Again, DHCP server, it will be like part of your DNS. You can configure it within the DNS, or you can have it as a separate DHCP server, and then you can configure that server as the DHCP server. And then name server is again, it will be like part of your DNS server, or you can again configure that as a separate server. This name server, whatever that name resolution happens, like host name to IP address or IP address to host name, your name server will take that connection, and then it will forward it to your DNS server. So your all the IP resolutions or your host name resolutions, everything is to happen through your name server. Name server is servers on the internet. It will be specialized in internet handling queries regarding your local domain names of various vendors. So whatever the local domain name, whatever the DNS server you have it, so via name server, all the connection has to go. All your fully qualified host name to IP address, or from the IP address to host name, all the name resolution happens via name server. And then forward DNS and reverse DNS are the two concepts, whatever I just explained. Your forward DNS is the DNS is queried for the host name of a certain IPs. If you connect with IP address, it will ping you a fully qualified host name. Reverse name resolution is like if you query with your IP address, it will return you fully qualified host name. So that, like, vice versa, like, with the host name you can get IP address, and reverse DNS, like with IP address you can get a host name. So that's a two part of your DNS server. DNS server will handle this forward DNS, and then the reverse DNS. They will call it as a forward name resolution and reverse name resolution. And then these queries will be like handled with the help of your name server. So this is like a typical in industry, they all will be like having all these features in any of the organization. DNS, DHCP, and name server, these are like mandatory. Each of those organization will be like having these configurations. Right, so that's a typical concept of networking, how they will configure it in any of the industries. So what I can do now, I can quickly run through few of the basics of your Linux or networking. Uh, the moment you log into your any VM via IP address or host name, um, right now I probably, like, if I do host name, and this is my host name. If I do ns lookup, I'm just gonna get my IP address. The moment I do ns lookup, I'm gonna get my IP address. If I do ns lookup of my IP address, I should be able to get my host name. So that's a forward name resolution, reverse name resolution. Those will be like handled by your DNS server. That's the one thing. You have to verify whether your IP address and host names are properly resolving using DNS, using this ns lookup and the host name or the IP addresses. And then you want to check what are the IP address or interfaces associated with my Linux server. If I do ifconfig is a command which will tell you what are the interfaces are associated to your VM. So the moment you do ifconfig, you eventually see ENS 192, ENS 224, and sometimes Ethernet 0 and Ethernet 1, and sometimes you will may see ENP 192, ENP 1224. These are your interfaces. These are your NIC card associated to that VM or associated to that a physical server. These are your NIC card. So your internet card, internet cable plug-in card, right? These are your NIC cards, and then these are your IP address associated to that. These IP address are dynamically allocated by your DHCP, or you can manually allocate them using your static IP addresses. So these are your IP addresses, and then how you are going to verify whether these IP addresses are dynamic or static. So you can go to your GUI console, whatever that GUI console, VM GUI console, and then you can verify that one. So let's quickly log into the GUI. So this is my Oracle Lab 1 GUI. So if I log in here, how you going to check that IP addresses? You can pretty much go here, your application, and then your system tools here, and then settings. And then once you connected here, you will see this ENS 192 and then ENS 224. Just click on the setting box here, and then go to your IPv4, and then this is your automatic DHCP. So IP address is assigned by your DHCP server here. And I'll just cancel this one. I'll go to second one, go here, and then go to your IPv4. You can see this is a manual. You're going to assign that IP manually. So that's your static IP addresses which you assigned here. So these are your IP address allocation, either manual or your DHCP. So you can verify using this one. Or like other way to verify is these ENS 192, ENP 192. If you have a GUI console, you can verify using here. If you don't have a GUI console, there are some these interfaces are configured inside your etc sysconfig and network script. So this is the location etc sysconfig network script. Enter here, do ls-ltr. There are so many network configuration file here. What we are interested is our ENS 192 and ENS 224. These are the two interfaces what we have it in this particular server. If I cat ENS 192, this is my ENS 192, and you can see boot proto it says DHCP. And if I go with ENS 224, and then it says boot proto is none. It means it is not a DHCP IP address. If you say boot proto equal to DHCP, it means dynamically it's going to get assign the IP address here. I did not mention any IP address here. You can see like there's no IP address here. So dynamically your DHCP server will assign the IP, and then it will get that IP. This ENS 224, it says boot proto equal to none, and you can see at the end IP address, and then I have to assign manually IP address. So that's your static IP address. Either you can go ahead and then edit these files, VI, and then you can assign the IP address, or you can make it none and you can assign the IP address, or you can go to ENS 224, and then you can change your IP address. And if you want to configure it again as a DHCP, you can remove this entry, and then you can make a boot proto equal to DHCP. So this become your DHCP IP address. So you can make changes in your this configuration files here, and then do a service network restart. Service network restart will take that effect. Service network restart. So it will restart your network, and then it will get that whatever the changes, it will reflected whatever the changes you have done it here. IF config, and then if you change the IP address or whatever it is, it will reflect here. That's one thing, like you have to do that service network restart once you change that any network configuration. And then the moment you do IF config, it will list out all the interfaces. And then if you don't want to list all the interfaces, you want to list only that interface 192, just do IF config and then ENS 192. It will give only that ENS 192 details. And if you go IF config ENS 224, and then that will give only that 224 interface details. That these are your the actual interfaces and associated IP addresses. And then some of the other basic networking handy commands, like host name. Host name is a handy command which will give you like fully qualified host name. And then what's the IP address associated to my host name? I can use a host name -I, and then that will give me like what's the host name associated to my server. And if this is your Oracle Lab 1 is the host name, if you want to change that host name, so there's something called host name CTL, host name CTL. Status will give you that detail about that host, your host name, static host name, and then what version or what operating system is all having. So that's your host name CTL status. And then there's something called host name CTL set hyphen host name. You have to give that set host name, and then right now it is Oracle Lab 1. I'm just going to make it to Oracle Lab 5. I'll just make it as Oracle Lab 5. It's going to be set now. You can just check your host name CTL status, and you can now see your host name got changed to host Oracle Lab 5. So it's like host name CTL is other handy command which will tell you uh, whether the host name is properly set or not. So right now you are still seeing Oracle host name. You have to like connect to other session, then you will get that. You have to exit and you have to reconnect. If I do login to Oracle, I can see Oracle Lab 5 here. So you have to exit your session and then reconnect it, and then you will see that new host name. Again, I'll set it back to my host name 1. So this is like other way you can like easiest way to change your host name and other stuffs. You can use this host name CTL command to play around that. And then some other basics of your networking. Uh, Again, like everything, whatever we are covering right now here, it will be like already part of this particular workbook here. If I go all the way down, um, whatever the DNS, DHCP, whatever name resolutions, and then your name resolutions will be like available inside your etc name.config. Name.config is for setting up of your DNS server. If you are configuring your DNS server, you have to modify some name.config things and other stuff. Again, this will be like part of your rack. So you have to like configure your DNS server in if you're trying to install your rack. Otherwise, you no need to set up your DNS servers here. And then other thing is like your resolve.conf, which will be like resolving with the IP addresses. So that's your name configuration, whatever your name server, which will be like added into your resolve.conf. Resolve.conf will be having your name server details. And then etc host, sometimes they used to mention cat etc host. Ideally, it is not recommended to mention anything under your etc host because everything has to resolve through your DNS server. So if you see cat etc host, you'll be having your IP address, and then followed by your fully qualified host name. People used to say fully qualified host name. What is that fully qualified host name? That is like your host name dot your domain name, like your wipro.com or your infosys.com or oracle.com, whatever that domain name, it will be like appended with that host name. And then this is your short host name. So that's they will call it as a fully qualified host name. So they used to mention in your etc host IP address and host name, fully qualified host name under the short host name. So that's again not recommended to add anything into your etc host, provided there's a need of application, you can enter into your etc host. Otherwise, you no need to mention anything because everything will be like resolved by your DNS server. So that's about your DNS and your fully qualified host name. And then the moment you do host name, that's going to give you fully qualified host name. And then host name -i, that will give you IP address. And then host name -a, again that will give you a fully qualified host name or sometimes short name. Okay, this is going to be like short name here. Host name -a, it's a like short name. And then host name -f, I believe. That's going to give you like fully qualified host name. So these are like your handy commands. And then host name -f, that fully qualified host name, it will get it. And then again ifconfig, that will give you all the interfaces associated with that. And then your etc network or a network script, which will give you multiple Ethernet ports, interfaces. You can CAD them and you can see whether the DHCP or whether it's a static IP address allocation. All those things you're gonna see it over there, right? So once these are like basic checks what we're gonna do it. Once you are compatible with your Linux, like whatever the basic checks before you start with your database installation, whatever the basic checks are needed, whether the user is available or whether your directories are available, and whatever like the next step, right? Like your softwares, you have to download that software, and then you have to unzip that software, and then you have to create that prerequisites, RPMs and users. Once everything is ready, and then you will start with our actual database installation. So that will be like next steps. If you see like your installation prerequisites, like you have to create the groups. You have to create the groups first, and once the groups are created, and then you have to create the users. Oracle is the users. I'm going to create that Oracle users. Once the Oracle user is created, and then I'm going to assign all those groups to that particular Oracle user. So that user modification -g, and then I'm going to assign all those groups to that users. And once the groups are associated, and then I'm going to create the directories, our Oracle home directories. And then once the Oracle home is created, I'm just going to start with my database software installation. So that's your database software installations. Once the database software is installed here, and then we're going to go ahead and then create our database. Database creation, again, there are various methods. We will follow that one. So that's a basic understanding of how we have to set up the environment before we actually start our installation process. So one is our Linux understanding. So we should be like very good at your Linux. We have to be very comfortable with that. Whatever the new server your Linux admin will provide you, because the installation of your Linux server is purely a Linux admin activity. So he will install all the softwares. He will install all the uh, your Linux OS, ISO images, and all those things, and then he will provide you IP address or the host name with the username and password. You have to log in and you have to configure all the setup. Okay. Any questions so far? Like if it is like going too advanced or if it is too basics, just feel free to ask any questions. So this is all like we're just covering the basics, what all needed as a DBA, right? And then uh, other thing, like as I said, you have to go into your /home, and then that will tell you what are the users are created on this particular server. The moment you go inside your PWD is your like present working directory, which directory are available. Go into that particular directory like CD/home. That will like CD stands for your change directory, and then that is going to your home directory. And then inside that home directory, you will be like having their respective users home directories. And the moment anybody connect using this Oracle, Mallik or John, they will be like landed into that home directory. So these users you can verify by logging into CD home, and then they will give you like uh, what are the users are created on the server. And the other way to verify is like check your etc passwd. Passwd is like your password file, but it is a contain user details, not the password details. You have to cat this cat etc passwd, and then you will be having so many users here. Root is a user, bin, daemon, LP, sync. These are your service account. Whatever you're seeing here, these are your service account, not the actual user. These are your service accounts here, whatever you're seeing here, because like TCP dump, and then they don't have any home directory. Your NTP, and then they have NTP home. They don't have any home directory here. But if you see this Mallik user and John and then Oracle, these are the actual users. You can compare with this Mallik John user settings here, and then your home directories here, and then comparing them. Okay, this particular Linux server has these many users here. You can just make sure that, and then these are their respective homes: home Mallik, home John, and then home Oracle. These are your respective directories, or respective home directories are associated to those users. Right. That's the other way you can verify that user details. And then there's a one more file called /etc group. So there are so many groups you can see here, so many groups default built in, and there are so many new groups what we added here. Mallik is a group here, and then John is a group here, and then OInstall is a group, DBA, Oper, Backup DBA, DGDBA, KMDBA, RACDBA. These are like groups created on this server here. If I do ID Oracle, the moment I do ID Oracle, this particular Oracle user, UID is like the ID associated to that Oracle user, and then GID is a group ID. OInstall is the primary group for this Oracle user, And then there are some other like DBA and then install, again the secondary groups. We have something called primary groups and secondary groups in Linux. Like for example, if any user created in the Linux, I assume that this is my Linux user, Oracle. The Linux user created, and then he will be having two set of groups here. One is like a primary group, and then the second one is like secondary group. Primary group is stands with a small g, and then the secondary group is start with your capital G. If you want to assign the primary and secondary group, you have to use like -g or -small g or capital G. The Oracle user here, in this case, ID Oracle, it has a install as a GID, that's a primary group. And then he has again groups, that's the secondary group, install, and then the DBA. He has a whatever the primary group, again you can have it as a secondary group as well, no issue in that. And then he has some other secondary groups here. This is like for Oracle. If I do ID Mallik, ID Mallik, you can see Mallik, and then that ID associated to that Mallik user, and then he has Mallik as a primary group, and then Mallik as a secondary group. And then this is not a group, it's a default, comes with the user installation. So if I talk about Mallik, and then Mallik has again two groups, one is primary and one is secondary. So Mallik has its own group called Mallik, that's a primary group here. And then secondary group also has the same Mallik user here. So what is that? What that indicates? This primary group. The moment you create any files, the file will be like owned by that primary group, not the secondary group. For example, if I log into Oracle user, SU is like switch user, like SU and then hyphen Oracle, it will go to Oracle user. If I do PWD, I'm into home Oracle here. Great. So if I go here, I'll switch into Mallik user here, or like I can exit here. I can connect to Mallik user here. So this is Mallik user. You can see this is Mallik user, and then this is my Oracle user here. So I'm just going to create one directory called one.txt. Touch is the command to create that empty file. Touch one.txt. The moment I create one.txt with Oracle user, if I do ls-ltr, and then that one.txt file is now owned by Oracle because I created with the Oracle user. Obviously, the owner is Oracle, and then the default group will be like get assigned with install, because for the Oracle user, the primary group is install. That's where any file or any directory you will create, everything will be like owned by that Oracle user, and then that the group, whatever the primary group. So what we can do now here, I can create one directory, mkdir make directory. Mkdir stands for make directory. I'll just give one. So directory got created here. ls-ltr. So you can see this is one is the directory, and then one.txt is a file. How you can differentiate the directory or file? Very first bit here. If it stands with the D, that's the directory. Like one is the directory here. If it started with the D, it's a one is the directory. One.txt is the file. If it started with the dash, then that's the file. So this is the file, and then this is the directory. Both are owned by Oracle because created with Oracle user, and then associated with the install as a group, because primary group for my Oracle user is install. And similarly, if I go to this Mallik user here, again touch one.txt, and then mkdir1. So this is for directory. And if I do ls-ltr, you can see this one.txt and then directory one owned by Mallik user, and then the group is Mallik, because for Mallik user, primary group is Mallik. That's where this file or directory is owned by that respective groups. So these are like basic understanding as a DBA, like in the Linux part. Otherwise, like if you don't understand these users and groups or the permissions, then it will be like very hard to work as a DBA, because the basics fundamentals of your networking on the Linux are mandatory to continue with as a DBA file. Right. So that's basics of your Linux and networking. Pretty much that's what I wanted to cover. I can quickly recap. There are like one or two topics we might have missed it. Like we can just quickly recap that, and then we can take any questions and answers if anybody has it. Okay, one important thing is, okay, let's recap once again. Where you're going to download your ISO image. So obviously, each vendor has a different flavor, but I'm purely talking about Linux perspective, not the Windows. With come to Linux perspective, there are like many flavors in that Linux. I said like RHEL, your Oracle Linux, or your Ubuntu, SUSE. There are many RHEL flavors, many Linux flavors, and then you have to get those ISO images from the respective vendors. But widely used is your Oracle Linux. So Oracle Linux is freely available from your Oracle eDelivery. You can download that ISO image, you can download that software, and you can practice it. So that's like freely available. You can go and download those ISO images. Where you can install, where you can get your Oracle softwares, again, your Oracle eDelivery, go to Oracle eDelivery, and then search for that respective versions, your 11G, 12C, and then you can download that. That's a second thing. And then Oracle patches, again, that Oracle patches is a different concept. Oracle will release these patches on quarterly basis. And then whatever I told here, again, it will go by some advanced concept. You're going to install your Oracle software here. Once you download that 19C software, you're going to install it here. And then Oracle will release patches on quarterly basis. Oracle will release patches on Q1, Q2, and Q3 and Q4. Q1 will be like your Jan, Q2, and then Q3, like it will be like your Q2 and then Q3 and in Q4. The Q1 will be like Jan. Sorry, Oracle will release regularly your Jan patches, and then your April, and then your July, and then your October. So Oracle will release quarterly patches. You need to apply these quarterly patches on top of this Oracle Home in order to keep the security compliance, and then you have to fix the bugs. Oracle strongly recommend to apply these quarterly patches on top of your Oracle Home. Whatever this Oracle Home you installed, on top of that, you have to apply these patches here. If you see here, like if I go into U01 patches, ls-l, so these are your Oracle softwares, whatever the softwares, ending with 9960-01. If I go here, okay, that's a different software, right? Anyway, you have to download that software, and once the download is done, you have to install that. You have to unzip that software. Like this is your software directory. If I do ls, so these are your Oracle binaries. If I do pwd, U01 app Oracle product 19C DB home, this is your software. This software is installed here. Like this is a software downloaded, and then it is installed here. Once you install, this is your binaries here, and then on top of that, you need to install this whatever the Oracle security patches. That's again different concept, the patchings and other stuffs. So will be covered separately, that patching concept here. Like if I go, where is that patching here? Right. So this is your patching here. Like we'll be covering that patching, how you're gonna apply these patches, and then how you're gonna make sure that your database is security compliant, and then what's the best practice to apply these patches, how you're gonna apply to minimize the downtime and all those things. We'll be seeing that during the patching. So that's about how you can install the software, and then how you can apply the patch regularly on that. So that's your Oracle patches. And then again, where you're going to get that Oracle patches, there's different strategy on getting that Oracle patches. You have to get the Oracle license for the patching, and then you have to connect your Oracle MOS support, support.oracle.com, and then you have to log in with that that CSI number. That's not the free. You have to like get a license, and you have to buy that one. And then your Oracle VirtualBox. So that's like freely available. Just we saw that one, right? Like you have to go to your Google and search for Oracle VirtualBox. It's a freely available. Just download that, and then you can configure it in your own laptop. That's your where is that one? Your Oracle. This is your Oracle VM VirtualBox. So that's what we installed here, right? Just like normal software installation, just install that, and then you can, on top of that, you can create your own VM on that. Once the VM is ready, you can start with your setup or installation. And then we saw about Linux installation. That's your VL installation. So our installation will be like here, like what we started our installation. So your installation is got completed here now, what we started earlier. Then it'll ask you to reboot that server. Once you reboot, that's a final reboot. So your Linux will be ready, and then you can start using that Linux box. So that's the installation what we saw. There are like some post steps it will do after that installation. You have to just complete that post step so that it will be like ready to access. Let's quickly complete that one. Like this is your post steps, like license agreement. Just click on license agreement, accept license agreement. Okay. And then your network and user creation and all, just finish that configuration. So your Linux server installation is ready. Again, typically this is a part of your Linux admin guy. But again, good to know that before we proceed with our installation. This is your welcome screen. Just need to click, and then you can select your whatever the time zone, and then skip. So it will default ask you to create one user. Just create that user. And what is the password? You can provide that password. So this is your typical setup. So just finish it. Right. So your setup is done. So just close it. Your Linux installation is done. So either you can install it here, or you can make use of those readily labs available. So that's installation what we understood. And then again, understanding of Linux partitions. So again, if I go here, just exit from here. If I go into slash is the root partition which starts, and then on top of that, we'll be having a different partitions here. So these are like different root partitions will be like used for different purposes. Bin is for your binary executable, boot is for your grub or boot configuration file, dev is for your third-party softwares or your hard disk, whatever you install, the disk drive. So all those will be coming under dev, and then etc for your configuration files. Home is for your home location for all the users, for Mallik or Oracle, whatever the users, they will be added into that home directories. Libraries for like library executable, 64-bit library executables. Media is for your CD, DVD, whatever you insert into your VM. So it will be like comes under media. MNT is for mount point. If you want to mount any mount point, you will use this temporary mount point. OPT is for your third-party softwares, or you can install your agent and other stuffs here. What are that's a mount point what we created. It's a proc is for your holding the processes. Root is a root directory for that root user. Yeah, so many other directories, like where is for holding the logs. User is for user bin executables. SBin again is a 64-bit binary executable. Temp is for holding your temporary logs. So like so many directories used for so many purposes. And then M repo, if you set up M repo, you can do a M installation of those RPMs. If you don't set up M repo, like you have to manually install those RPM using RPM IVH command and other things. And then custom RPM packages, like again, like manually you need to install those packages. And then other tool like WinSCP, PuTTY, MobiXterm. So like handy commands, handy tools, which are regularly used as a DBA. So that's what we understood, where you're going to download ISO images, Oracle softwares, Oracle patches, and VMware Workstation and VirtualBox. And then we saw that installation of RHEL, and then different partitions for Windows and Linux. And this is one extra topic here. What exactly it means? In Linux, we have different partitions: ext2, ext3, ext4, and JFS and XFS. Currently, like latest was like XFS. In Windows, latest was NTFS. Windows, they will need the NTFS file system, and in Linux, we use XFS, or you can use any of these partitions. If you go here at that side, what's the advantage of each of these partitions? They will tell you. So if I cat here, cat etc fs tab. So if I do one more time cat this file system here, this whatever the root file system here, you can see this root file system here or the swap file system, these two. the root file system is formatted with XFS. That's a default file system. And then this, whatever the mount point, what we added, df-h, this mount point we formatted with ext3 file system. So again, left to you, which partition you want to go. That's just a file system format you're going to do. Each of those file system has its own advantages. For example, if you go to this particular site here, Red Hat site, that will tell you what are those advantages and limitations of those partitions. Right. So if I go down here, if you go with your XFS, and then each file system you can go up to in a RHEL 7, you can go up to 500 TIB. And then if you go with ext4, you can go maximum 16 terabyte TIB, 16 TIB. If you go to ext3 or ext2 or 3, you can go up to 2 TIB. So that's a limitation of those sizes. Whatever the sizes you're seeing it here, the maximum size, just 1 GB we given here, based upon whatever the file system format you did it, and then it will support these supported versions here, supported the file system size. So latest one is XFS. So most of the system industry, they will go with XFS because that's the maximum size available, supported maximum size. That's that has its own limit. That's the file system format. Otherwise, like it's just a normal file system for us. And then these are like various mount point what we saw, and then followed by your M repository, and then your manual installation, or how you're going to format the disk, how you're going to mount the disk. That's what we saw. And then we installed manually RPMs, and then some of them ready tools we understood. And then we understood some of the networking and the basics of Linux. Right, so that's pretty much. So we'll stop it here, and then starting from Monday, we'll start with our regular DBA classes, starting with the installation and configuration and other stuffs. But if you have any questions, queries, we'll discuss it. Otherwise, we'll stop it here for today. All right, son. So we'll stop it here, guys. We'll see you on Monday on our regular classes. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Har.
Thank you, sir.